Okay, good morning and welcome to the January 5th, 2021 meeting of the State Designer Selection Board. I'll call the roll. I will call the roll, and after I say your name, please indicate that you are present. Erin Fogarty Miller, Board Support.
Here.
Sue Anderson, representing Minnesota State Arts Board.
Present.
Bill Byer, representing AIA Minnesota.
Present.
Tom Murphy, representing AGC.
Present.
Jan Shagaloff, representing ACEC.
Present.
Ted Tucker, public member of the board.
Present.
And Glenn, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce those from your side of the table.
Yeah, Wayne Wisłowski is on. He's the Director of Real Estate Construction Services. I'm Glenn Hano with Real Estate Construction Services. I'm going to be the project manager as the project moves forward. And with Homeland Security Energy Management agency, under the agency of Department of Public Safety, we have Joe Kelly. He's the Director of HSCM, and Kevin Reed, he's the Assistant Director.
And I am Catherine Leonard as Chair and public member of the board. And I note for the record at this time, we have two people who are attending who are non-participants at this moment. I'd like to remind you of a couple of things. First of all, there is a chat feature and a raise hand feature of this WebEx platform. Please don't use those. If you need to say something, please just chime in. We've been it's been rather easy for us to manage, the input from different people. But by the same token, if somebody talks over you, don't be shy and talk, and please come in afterwards. Understand for Joe and Kevin that this is recorded, and this tape will be made available to the public, more importantly to the firms that are shortlisted as they prepare for their interviews in a couple of weeks. I also remind the board and everyone else that we get feedback. We get feedback if you rustle paper, we get feedback if you open a thermos, we get feedback. So if you could mute your microphones when you think you might be doing those things, that would be really appreciated, particularly for those who want to listen going forward. We have one main item today, and that is shortlisting for project 2003. Excuse me. Yeah, 2003. I turn your attention to the agenda and ask if there are any changes or corrections. Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Tucker.
Second, Shagaloff.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Turn your attention to the meeting minutes of our meeting on December 29th. Any changes or corrections? Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved, Tucker.
Second, Byer.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed. Okay, so here we are. The next agenda item is the shortlisting for project 2003. And just for Kevin and Joe in particular, just to give you an idea of how this is going to work, we're going to ask you folks to give us more of an explanation of the project. We will likely have questions about the project. And then we're going to review each of the 7 proposals that were submitted. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn to help us understand a little bit more about the project.
Well, I'm going to defer to Joe Kelly because I think he is very passionate about this project and probably have a better explanation for all of us. Joe?
Okay.
Hey, Glenn. Good morning. Good morning, board members. Thanks for your participation in this very important project. We've been, as Glenn has alluded to a couple of times, we've been pursuing this for more than 10 years. We went through the pre-design process back and finished it in 2011, and now with full funding, we're sort of restarting. But just for your perspective, the State Emergency Operations Center is what it sounds like. It's an emergency operations center where we gather representatives of state agencies, federal partners, and local communities, volunteers, to coordinate the state's response to an emergency or a disaster. And typically we gather folks from state agencies like the Minnesota National Guard, the Department of Transportation, State Patrol, Health, etc. And as requests for assistance come in from local governments, that's the clearinghouse and the coordination center where we do that. We are in the midst of our largest activation ever, which has really taught us a lot of things about what kind of facility we need, not just for your typical spring flood or wildfire, but a global pandemic. We are on day 296 of continuous activation here at our facility in downtown St. Paul. Currently we have probably a couple dozen people that are working in the main EOC on a irregular basis. We've had over 100 here. So again, when you think about the size and scale of this, we've had over 100 here, and we should plan for having 200 folks from a variety of different agencies that would come into a central location and do everything from coordination of the allocation of resources to communicating with the public. So picture a operations center, if you will, pick your favorite, movie, disaster movie or military movie where they show an operations center. In addition, we also have the offices for, I would say, for our planning purposes, about 75 staff. And the collaborative workspace and individual workstations that type of team would need. So I look at this project in two big chunks. One is a state-of-the-art operations center, and the other big chunk is the offices and workspace for our agency staff. It is a one-of-a-kind, needs to be a no-fail type of a facility, and by that we mean it needs to be able to be secured. It needs to have adequate redundancy, backup sources of power, communications, and those types of things. So the facility we've been in here in downtown St. Paul probably fails on almost all of our critical requirements, but that's okay. That's in the past now. I don't need to give you the legislative testimony as to why we need this facility. So I don't know if you maybe it's easier to just answer questions about the facility and what we need from it. I guess we had the two big chunks, the operations center and our offices. There's an ancillary piece, and that is to have a media center where the governor or the commissioner or cabinet members can come and create and broadcast a high quality media event, if you will. Right now we got the governor kind of rattling around from about 3 or 4 different locations in downtown St. Paul, and that is clearly one of our bigger things, is as an adjunct to that operations center is to have the public information media center. And the other is that this is a dual use or triple use facility, in that we also need a continuity of government facility. So we need a place without replicating the Capitol where we can bring the governor and the other constitutional officers, members of the governor's cabinet, and legislative leaders together to do some collaborative decision making and communicating. So those are kind of the big chunks, and I don't know if that's what you're looking for, Glenn, but certainly available to answer any questions about about the functionality or the things that we need here.
That was perfect. I didn't know about the two ancillary needs compared to last time, so that's good.
So turning to the board, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. My first question is, what is the project delivery methods? It's a construction manager at risk, or it's a kind of traditional delivery?
We've already made the decision to go construction manager at risk,
Okay.
and we've already started the process so we can get them on earlier with the design team.
Mm-hmm.
But just, I want to tag on to that, Glenn, when the RFP was put out and you had your mandatory walkthrough, that was not known at the time, right?
Correct. We told them we were leaning that direction, but hadn't made that decision. And since then, we did determine it was more important to get them on to actually be there, probably at the start of design development, to help the team.
Okay.
Yeah, my second question is, as a building itself, what is the requirement for anti-terrorism protection? You know, what?
We are starting the project out as a pre-design. We have gone over it before, and if there was a scale of 1 to 10 on hardness, we're in the middle. But those are all the things that the design team is going to help us with, help Homeland Security Emergency Management, because we're both designing to a budget and a need, and hardness is in there. So where all these lines intersect will be the perfect project.
Okay.
Catherine, I have a couple questions as well.
You bet.
So
Hey, Glenn,
congratulations on Kevin on this job. This is really exciting work, and I have heard the legislative testimony on it several times myself, so it's really exciting. That was a statement. My question is on the selection of the designer for the pre-design, and then the language in the RFP says that the remainder of the schematic and the full design will be via supplemental agreement. That was pretty interesting to me. I don't know if I've seen something like that before. So can you just explain to me what flexibility you think you're going to get from that, or why you've taken that approach?
We have done that on past projects. It helps with the continuity of the project and keep it moving forward. The need for Emergency Operations Center is apparent, and we don't want to delay the process. After the pre-design is done, we will negotiate with an expected range of fees with the selected firm. And if we can't reach an agreement, we have the right to go to the second firm.
Okay. The other question is regarding the site location, kind of sight unseen. Just curious how you foresee that to play out. I mean, it sounds like you have a short listing of some sites, and then I'm just curious why you didn't select a site. Do you want to give flexibility to the design team, or cost, or what's your thinking there, Glenn?
When we originally did a pre-design over a decade ago, we had a traffic study plan done, and they determined that a site in the North Metro was ideal. So we have been working on this short list of sites in the background and have not come to an agreement on any site yet. So it probably still is an unknown if the design team is going to be helping us with site selection, or if we'll have one about the time they're under contract.
I have a question regarding the pre-design that was done 10 years ago. Is this a start over, do-over kind of project, or is there some value to be salvaged from that work?
Certainly a lot of value, but we are treating it as a start over, mainly because of the lessons learned. Technology changes in 10 years. You know, and now the media center aspect, the continuity of government aspect, there's just some new requirements on what they've learned over the past.
Thanks.
Well, it sounds as though this last few months have been a lot of lessons learned as well. So, other questions from the board? So I have a couple. You talk, the site is not known, but you also talk about potentially a shared facility. I mean, having another actor or another component in there. Do you know when that decision will be made?
That decision's already been made.
Okay.
Stand facility.
Okay.
And we did indicate that in an addendum to the RFP, I believe.
Okay. Okay. Can you also talk about the role of the security consultant? You know, different firms took it in different directions. One, which was you know, we're putting in all of the CCTV cameras and we're doing, you know, all that kind of thing. And the other has taken the approach of we need to look at someone who can do some risk management for us. What's your intention here?
All of the above. The facility needs to be secure in itself. It needs to be redundant in power and communications. It needs to be secured just from, I don't know, protesters out front,
Okay.
or people trying to sneak in. So and communications is probably the top one. So it does fall under all those categories. Like you noted, that there was consultants all over the board on security. So it's going to be partly the charge of the design team to help us with what's needed.
Okay. So I have a couple. Sorry, I have a couple more. You listed a lot of requirements for the architectural side of your team. 15 years of experience, or a minimum of 15 years of experience. What's the name? Flesh that out for me, Glenn, because I'm trying to figure out whether it's I've got a lot of experience, or I had experience over 15 years ago, or is it I have experience currently on the state of the art of these facilities?
I chose, and it was my decision. I chose 15 years just because that puts us before the last time we asked all these people to help us with a pre-design. So if they've been doing emergency operation centers since that time, 11 years ago, I think they should be in the running, because if you note in all these proposals, they've all done emergency operation centers. So I think that was just a good number out of the hat to get qualified firms.
And then as we look, so the definition of experience in the architectural world is one thing. What about experience in the consulting world, particularly the electrical, AV, security? You're looking for more current experience on that, or is there not a threshold that you're managing?
Probably not a threshold. It'd probably be more the experience.
Okay.
In fact, when we were doing primary and secondary scoring criteria, the experience of the firm and the experience of the staff were very high on the list. So I was tending to look at the number of facilities, not necessarily EOC, but just the critical mission type EOC projects.
Okay. Any other question from the board? So with that, let's now go and look at each of these proposals. Before we do that, Glenn, I'm going to ask you to confirm that you've had no prior contact with the proposals about the project outside of the Q&A process and the informational meeting. Okay. And this in part is for for Joe and Kevin, but these proposals are confidential, and therefore we need to refer to them by their letter, firm A, firm B, firm C, as well as the individuals. So rather than saying an individual's name, we refer to them as the project manager or the designer or the electrical engineer. We've all been known to slip up and say a firm's name. And in the past, we've been able to edit that out of the audio tapes. We can't do that with this tape, with this kind of recording, but don't worry. I mean, it happens. Don't get flustered, and we just move on. I point out to you the criteria that was in the RFP. Of primary importance are the qualifications, technical competence in the required field, and prior performance. The project understanding, approach, and methodology. Of secondary importance is their leadership, integration, and cohesiveness of the team, their ability to deal with aesthetic factors, and their understanding and experience and approach to sustainability and energy efficiency. So just to, again, for Joe and Kevin, just to give you an idea how we're going to do this, we're going to take these one at a time. We typically talk about the team. Is it complete? Is it the right experience for the project? Are their roles clearly defined? How are they organized? How will they work together? And how will they work with you? Then we talk about the projects. Are the projects comparable and give confidence that they will understand the scope of this project? And then we talk about aesthetics. And so team, project, aesthetics, do the project examples and design narrative give confidence in their ability to meet the project's goals? And then lastly, and perhaps what I think is the heart and soul of these proposals, is their approach and methodology. So we'll talk about, do they convey an understanding of the project? What is their approach that will meet the goals of their project? So with that, let us turn to firm A. And let me just, so why don't I start off? We'll talk about the team. I think the team is complete, although I'm not sure who their specialist is. Is a registered communication distribution designer. I suspect it's one of these folks, but they've not identified that. But I think by and large, I think the team is complete. It's not clear to me as I look at this how they're folding in the role of planning and operations consultant. And it just wasn't evident in how they described the relationship of their team. And I suspect that that role is going to be very important in this process.
And I noted through several of these proposals, I don't know if it's a term of art or what, but it didn't match up in many of the proposals.
That's right.
And I think they're all there, but
yeah.
And I'm not picking on any particular project or a proposer, but it was difficult. And I think because they've done a lot of these projects all over the country, that they call them something different in different places. That's the only conclusion I could come to, but I'm not blaming anyone, but it is a little confusing throughout all of them.
Yeah, the term subject matter expert, didn't land particularly well, nor did we get that understanding either through their organization part or through their approach and methodology, which is where you typically see it.
In terms of the team, what I noticed, and wasn't sure of. It didn't seem like there was a lot of federal experience. I didn't see GSA, a lot of governmental work, more maybe local, state, municipality, if I looked at this right. And I was looking hard for how registered that security specialist was. Maybe they just didn't note RCDD, but there were some specific things that were called out in the RFP that included that United Facility Compliance, the UFC special articles of knowledge. And I didn't see that with any of the team members where it would count.
Other comments on this team? And you're going to hear this from me. So let's talk about their project examples. And you're going to probably hear this for all 7 firms. I'm going to look to Glenn and to Joe because I think many of these projects we don't know enough about. But I can't tell looking at the projects if they're particularly relevant to this project. So I guess I look to Glenn and Joe for comments on that project experience. Glenn, you're on mute.
Yeah, when you see EOC, that one's obvious, but also in the same vein of project would be the SCIFs, that's compartmentalized projects, mission critical facilities. And we had an order in the RFP of what would be more important. Oh, I'm sorry, that was probably in the CM at risk one where it was actually in an order. But I'd say EOCs, SCIFs, data centers all kind of fall into the same electronic parts of it.
Other comments? So, as I look through these projects, there are such different scopes and magnitudes. It's hard for me to kind of evaluate. So the operations center, for instance, in Williston, that I believe is under construction. And that is one where the EOC consultant was engaged and involved. The other 2 projects, only the cost estimator and the project manager were involved in those projects. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, do these projects support the notion that these individuals can do the work? We need coffee this morning.
So I'll give you my opinion. I mean,
that's what we need.
If you compare to all the proposals, I'd say yes, they have the experience to do one, but they are probably the lightest on the examples of qualified projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think they're relying quite a bit on the fact that they are currently working with their consultant on the project that leads their experience. It seems to be the strength that they're promoting.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure about the project on page 11. Is that a university facility or is that a teaching lab versus a true operations center?
Yeah, this is Joe. When I look at that project, I don't see that as necessary, not being very comparable to our project. the one on page 9 is, but it's at a very, I would say, small scale. It's like it probably has the pieces, but just the magnitude. And then I am a little confused by the one on page 10 because it's got a lot of other ancillary facilities that don't necessarily relate to a state emergency operations center. There's a significant portion of that, if I'm reading this right, involves some other, maintenance facilities and things of that nature. So, yes, but not strong correlation. The project on page 9 is probably the closest, but
Sure.
again, a facility that's the scale is probably significantly different than what we're looking at. But at least probably the components are there.
Joe, I'm back to a question, not so much on this proposal, but what's the difference between a state facility and say a county or a city facility? Is there a significant difference?
I think I would say, a state facility, or excuse me, a county facility is going to have the county government departments that are coming together to again support a response from all different types of functional areas like road maintenance, law enforcement, utilities, public health, etc. But it's all within the county for the most part. When you get to a state emergency operations center, your course could have something as broad as the entire county, all of state government, and then maybe more critically, these external partners, particularly from federal agencies like FEMA, the Department of Defense, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and so forth. So again, it's a similar function, but it's quite different because of the scale and or the breadth and depth. One is sort of a intramural operation inside a county, and the other is much more interscholastic, if you will, bringing in all kinds of partners from a much broader range.
Okay. Other comments about their project experience?
I've got a note here about their energy efficiency track record in terms of B3. Looks like there's specialty there. They're specialists, in fact, influence of passage of the 2030. And also the architect themselves have won, well, they've been finalists in B3 projects for awards.
So any other comments about the projects in particular before we move on to aesthetics? And I know that was a secondary criteria. I don't know that it needs much more comment than, their projects look nice, both inside and out. So I'm sure they will do a terrific job in terms of your facility. Moving on to approach and methodology. Comments about that? And to me, this is where the heart and soul is of a proposal. I mean, you'll get a lot about how a firm will work with you, what they think the issues are related to the project. So comments about this approach and methodology. Okay, well, I'll start then. I thought it started off fairly strong, page 12 and 13. They seem to have a good grasp of what the project was, talking about the site, talking about efficiency and layout or design. But I thought that they really didn't get much beyond that in terms of what is their approach to either the design process or their thoughts or issues that will need to struggle with during the design.
I agree with Catherine. I thought that it was okay. It wasn't boilerplate or anything. A little bit of detail, but what drew my attention, and maybe this is not right, but I felt that there was a real negativity to the constraints of project page, where it seemed like, yes, there's lots of things to consider, that constraints on every project, but I don't know, it just seemed like it was in a negative light.
Yeah, I have the same comments Sue has. It's kind of a new project, and it's seems like constraints is kind of more related to existing project or remodeling, but it should be solve this constraint during design. It's not really a constraint. It's a design issue.
I didn't have any sense that they saw that the building would help the personnel work together, gather together, relieve stress, all those other things that I think have been mentioned earlier is important. There's a lot of technical, high-tech, how human beings will operate here and use these tools successfully. I didn't get a sense of that in this one and several others, but we'll come back to that.
Right. Other comments about their approach and methodology? With that, they are a Minneapolis firm, neither targeted nor veteran owned, and their net fees per Minnesota employee are $12,435. Moving on to firm B. So interesting teaming on this particular team. These are two prime firms that we've seen in the past who have come together. Plus, they've also got the addition of their security consultant, who is more in the realm of security strategies for the building. And curious that in the security consultant who's doing security risk assessment, they have someone who's now working for the Metropolitan Airports Commission.
They had some strong team members. Security design has a project with our own state capitol complex. The acoustical person on the team has done some big projects that might be applicable to a big gathering space and acoustics. And they do research, they seem quite accomplished. And structural did indicate their ATFP experience.
Yeah, on the same subject of the combination of these two firms, they listed 2 PMs, and I'm not sure if if it's benefit a project to have 2 project managers, on each firm. So you really didn't identify 1 PM,
I think they're clarifying that by splitting out the work by pre-design emphasis and design emphasis. And on the organizational chart, the lead sub-consultant architect is not identified as a project manager.
Yeah, but we always emphasize to have a day-by-day contact. What's mean you start and you finish, so it's nice to have a one person in charge,
Well, Jan, I think I get an impression that the individual, I'm going to turn to page 7, the individual at the top of the matrix on page 7 is that project manager who will lead the design principal, who will lead the project architect, and who will lead throughout the process. And I think it's also evident on page 8 how they've identified that individual. And then I think, as Bill says, there's sort of sub-levels of program leadership, design leadership, and cost management.
Right, that's an organizational chart that actually organizes for a change.
I thought it was interesting with this organizational chart that they've placed the cost estimator up in that same tier of leadership as the program and design. And I thought, to me, that is particularly healthy in a project that has a very defined budget.
I agree.
Mhm.
So any other comment? I'd like to go back to this comment or the question I had about this particular individual who's with the Minneapolis Airports Commission. I mean, is that I'm looking to Glenn or Joe. We don't see a lot of evidence as to what that role will be for identifying the credentials. No.
Which page was this consultant on in their bios?
Okay, so that individual, the biography of that individual is on, give me a moment, at the bottom of page 6.
Okay,
Identified as
got it.
EOC operations and security consultant.
Hmm.
She's with this particular firm, but she's identified as the manager of operations programs for the Metropolitan Airports Commission.
As a consultant, one assumes.
I wouldn't, okay.
That seems to be what they're saying. The Airports Commission subbed out that role to a private contractor. I mean, that's how I read it, but I could be wrong. In either case, the experience appears to be there.
Yeah, this is Joe. I think it's the other way around. That person does work as an employee of the Metropolitan Airports Commission, is responsible for their emergency operation. I think as a side job, if you will, to maybe not say it correctly, she's making herself available as a consultant for projects like this, and is in this context appears to be doing that through the security company as well. But that person is a sitting operations and emergency manager for a major jurisdiction like the Metropolitan Airports Commission.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I've got I don't have that proposal in front of me right now, but if we're talking about the same person, or maybe this is a different person. I know that one of the team players actually used to work for the Minnesota Homeland for emergency management. That could be a plus.
Yeah, that's correct. That person did work here at one point not within the operational side, but within the grants administration, but certainly is familiar with the structure, function, role, and mission of the organization. Plus, we would count that jurisdiction as one of our primary customers, if you will. So quite familiar with us and our mission and our organizational structure and functions.
And which individual is this, Sue? Give me a page that they're on.
I have abbreviated notes, no page numbers, but this was security specialist on the team roster.
It's at the bottom of page 6.
Thank you.
The person at the very bottom of page 6.
The person, okay, so let me just, the person at the top of page 5 who will lead that programming effort. I mean, this is the heart and soul of a pre-design. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, does that individual have the kind of experience that you need for this to lead you in a programming effort?
when I look, if I'm reading the relevant experience part of that correctly, yes, kind of, if you will. There a lot of work very focused on one particular industry and one location. An emergency operations center at a pretty basic level. The reference in there to the fire department. So, yes, but not. Yeah, not a perfect fit.
On the other hand, the second person on page at the top of page 5 from the same firm, I think, fleshes out the breadth of experience in mission critical kinds of facilities. So I think you have to take them together almost.
Okay, other comments about this team and how they're organized? To return to the project experience. I mean, clearly many of the team members have worked together on these projects, which is clearly a plus. Again, I'm looking at Joe and Glenn to say, are these projects that are evidence of their prior experience relevant to the project at hand?
I was kind of in my notes just keeping a shorthand method, and what it said there was 2 to 4 ? So we're in the ballpark, but not extensive experience.
Yeah, I guess I would agree with that. Some of the work on the capital and other things. That's we talked about the security issue earlier. We're not building a fortress or a bomb shelter. It needs to be a public building. And it needs, for example, like the Capitol, where people need to be able to come and go, but we need to be able to control access and be able to shut it down to a higher level of security when needed, as opposed to creating an impregnable facility. So facilities that have ready access to the public, but have the ability to secure themselves through access control, monitoring, and so forth, I think is a plus. And there's a couple in there that do that. There are a lot of projects though that are, I don't think, I just don't, either they're standard office buildings or limited function that I'm sure are nice facilities, but not necessarily equivalent to what we're looking for.
Other comments about their project experience? To return to their approach and methodology.
I did score them a little higher than average. In aesthetics, they actually did have a paragraph on it and mentioned the identity anyway, aesthetics dealing with the identity. But they didn't really mention a lot about working with a team that included the CM and the people at Homeland Security and the Department of Administration, which kind of lacked in a lot of them, but I'd written that down.
Again, I was a little confused at the earlier part of this proposal with how are they organized, and the approach and methodology didn't help either, particularly with their, how are they going to do this planning? What is the nature of the roles of the AOC planner and other consultants in that? And it seemed to be lacking to me in that regard. Other comments about their approach and methodology? I think I need to send chocolates to everybody.
You have my permission.
Yeah, okay. No other comments about their approach and methodology? With that, they are a Minneapolis firm, neither targeted nor veteran owned, and their net fees per Minnesota employee are $10,787. Turning now to firm C. So I do have to ask, Joe, I realize that the photo on the cover of their proposal is a Fortune 10 company. It's a private company. But is that what a room like that will look like? I mean, just huge monitors and I mean, that's a pretty impressive photo.
Yes, Catherine, that is a visualization of way of doing it. You often hear about the glass wall or the walls of information. You know, one of the things we strive for in an emergency operations center is to make sure there's a common operating picture and a common understanding, and certainly displays of information. But that is a reasonable depiction of a way to do it. Yes.
Wow. I'm impressed.
Yeah, it looks to me like maybe a utility company or a telecommunications company based on some of the graphics. But yes, that's you could visualize the emergency operations center that way. There's always questions in our mind whether you sit people in rows and individual workstations or you cluster them in pods based on their functional area. How much do you put into the main floor versus breakout rooms and so forth? But that's for another discussion. But that's a reasonable visualization of a main floor of an emergency operations center.
Cool. I want to come and tour this thing when it's up. Okay.
We look forward to having you.
I digress. So I'll start in on this one. It's a complete team. They added an additional security consultant for security and blast protection, which I thought was rather interesting.
I agree that I was impressed with the team, if that's where you're going with this, Catherine. They recognize things that were important. The SCIF, where they've got over 20 secure projects either underway or done. They have a specialist. It's RCPD and NTS. I just saw a lot in here that seemed to answer what was required in the RFP for a strong team.
Other comments about the individuals on the team and how their working relationship? I thought page 5 and 6, both the narrative as well as the graphic, really did tell much of how these folks are going to work together. And I think they place strong emphasis on the EOC specialist.
To have them in-house seems helpful.
Yes.
They acknowledge the CM at risk, but do include a cost estimator. They seem to kind of imply that the cost estimator would lead throughout the project. I guess that gets further into the approach and understanding, but they acknowledge both, that they need one for a full team and that there's a CM at risk that will run the construction.
Other comments about this team? So turning to their project experience. And again, I'm going to turn to Joe and Glenn to ask, are these projects relevant to the project at hand?
The chart on page 7 would suggest that at least they make the claims.
I think some of their projects are. The one on the right side of page 8, the left side of page 9, and then the one that's on the cover with the confidential one of that operations center, I think are apt, if you will. Some of the others are more are less so, but some of them also get to the office part component as well. But yeah, I see some things in here that I think give them a pretty good idea of what it is that we're looking for and the kind of help we'll need.
Regarding projects, I'm curious on this one and maybe others as we're looking through. Do you see military ops or military readiness type of facilities as pretty comparable in terms of relevant project experience?
Yeah, sort of. I'm sorry to give you a squishy answer. Yeah, because of some of the things that they have in there for security and maybe some of their redundancy, having spent 30 years in the Army and then the National Guard, the facility functions are quite different, though, with an emphasis on those facilities, although some, like the headquarters building out at Arden Hills, relates to the office functioning. But a lot of times National Guard readiness centers and armories and military things relate specifically to training soldiers, maintaining equipment, keeping stores of supplies. So I think those give them some valuable experience, particularly on some of the security, anti-terrorism things, force protection, because again, a lot of military facilities, again, aren't, it might sound contradictory, but they're not fortresses. They're regular buildings that have to have the ability to secure themselves. So yes, but not directly. So somewhat indirectly, but they're not, compared to some of these, I'm, with, and not with this particular firm, but wayside rests, points of entry, I see very little, other than they do require security. But from a functionality, I give them some points for that, but not direct. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Well, and I think those kinds of projects demonstrate their ability to work with either the state of Minnesota or with design standards that are imposed, and but yes, don't really relate to the functionality of what this facility is. Other comments about the projects that have been identified? So a lot of the folks who are listed in this proposal worked on many of these, maybe not all together, but I'm particularly pleased to see that they're EOC specialist, if we understand what that role is on at least 2 of those critical projects that were identified as perhaps the most pertinent.
Yeah, if I'm reading it right, the project described on page 14 with the emergency operations center design for another state's military department is quite useful, I guess. I mean, as far as experience, that again looks familiar, looks like they understand the concept, and have been involved in some work at the state level.
Yeah, and it's always hard for us to manage who's doing what and what were they doing on that project, but that project is been associated with the principal in charge of this team. Other comments about their project experience?
I'll just refer again to their chart on page 7, which explains the relevance of each project to the criteria for this project. So I found that very useful.
Turning now to aesthetics. Clearly the photos that represented, in my eyes, they look appealing. They don't look, I mean, I think very nice design.
I have thoughts about the aesthetics because I'm not sure how that term helps us discussing this project, because this is not something for the public to see and be impressed by, but I think the aesthetics have a lot to do with how the personnel who are gathered here can operate efficiently. So it's more an environmental design using the spaces to help the work. So, and I think that was shown very well in this one. And I think that's on page 14. They have description of an EOC and how they approach that in their design considerations, which it seemed very strong and a complete understanding of what needs to be done, certainly in human factors. And I'm not well versed in the technical factors, but they seem to have a good understanding of that as well.
Yep.
There were 3 things that I like to see in their approach and understanding. One, they kind of jumped in and gave their opinions on site selection. They were familiar with the North Metro that was suggested as where the potential sites might be. Anyways, they weighed in with some interesting advice. They brought up COVID and pandemic and how we might design buildings in the future for spatial relationships in HVAC. And then the third thing was the schedule understanding. I liked that they spoke about the fact that they understand that there's a goal on funds where you have to use them within the right amount of timing, and that they would achieve that December 2021 deadline.
Other comments about their approach and methodology? Well, I like Sue, I thought they start off with their location analysis, which, you know, it's a fictitious, but shows a little bit about what their thinking is. I thought that their approach and methodology was more focused than many, and focused on not just we'll do this here, we'll do this there, but really focused on some of the issues that were specific to this project. And I too thought their work plan was rather interesting. I wasn't quite tracking everything, but clearly gave a sense of that they're at least organized within the framework of pre-design, design, bidding, and construction.
I would say back to whether the aesthetics, whether that's the right word or not, and then we roll in the pandemic. The quality of the work environment and the human factor, if you will, is incredible. I mean, we have been here for, again, 297 straight days, sometimes 24 hours a day, people working 12, 16, 18-hour shifts, sleeping on their office floors. And we have seen the impact that a facility and its amenities or lack thereof affect the impact, rather the effectiveness of our staff's ability to do good work. It's just, I mean, it's like having students in a classroom that's overheated or too small or too noisy. It really does make I think a significant contribution to the organization's effectiveness. So I appreciate their attention to that, if you will. And that's not just griping about the crappy facility we've been in, but it really does highlight that you need a proper facility that deals with the human and the people-centric aspects of work, especially when it's difficult work under sometimes challenging conditions. And I do appreciate, I have thought a lot about the pandemic and about social distance and remote work and the size of rooms and consolidated big spaces versus smaller breakout things because of what we've learned over the last 10 months. So I appreciate them acknowledging that, and I agree with the site analysis that shows some fictitious site or not. It shows some understanding of how this facility fits on a piece of land and what needs to be there. So, yeah.
Other comments about their approach and methodology? With that, they are a Minneapolis firm, neither targeted nor veteran owned, and their net fees per Minnesota employee are $15,458. Turning now to firm B. Okay, so they are, I believe they are a complete team. I'm just looking for here, so give me a moment. That has worked together on several projects with the EOC design subconsultant as well as the prime, which really lends itself to perhaps a working relationship that could be desirable for you folks. I'd add, however, that there are many folks on page 7 that we have no idea what their roles will be, and we have no idea what their resumes look like. So I'm not sure how they fit into the fit in with the team. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 folks that I just don't know what they do. They have titles and some may be obvious, but not so much so.
They were the original group that did the 2011 pre-design, and they do acknowledge the team members that they brought over from that 2011 pre-design.
Other comments about the team?
Their partner firm, it's not clear, but it doesn't appear that they were part of the pre-design 10 years ago.
I believe
So
that's the case.
Yeah, reading through this, I wonder why their partner firm from California is not the prime in this one. They seem to have a bigger role in all these projects, and in the when we get down to the experience, than the firm that is applying as the prime firm.
Bill, I'm going to disagree with you. If you look on page 8, the if we're identifying the same person, the firm out of California, that prime individual was the designer for the pre-design.
Okay, I didn't see that listed.
No, it's not.
His experience, which that's what threw me off.
Yeah.
You'd think that would be front and center.
Yeah. You would.
Yeah, and you'd be wrong. So,
but again,
at least I can confirm they were a part of the team. Yeah.
Well, let me ask Joe or Glenn, was that individual involved in the pre-design?
Yes.
Okay. There's your definitive answer.
yeah, okay.
He looks very familiar with the recognizable, unique, recognizable name. So I'll vouch for Glenn's recollection.
Well, and clearly they've worked on. I mean these two firms have worked together on other projects. I mean, they identify 4 additional projects at the top of page 2 that they have worked together in the past, or maybe it's current. Who knows? So turning to their project experience, again, as I flip through all this experience, there's many by the lead designer. And some also with the prime firm. And I turn to Joe and Glenn to say, are these projects, do they have enough components that are similar to your project that lead you to believe that they have the right credentials? I'm thinking specifically the project on page 10 for the designer and 11.
The short answer from me is yes, I believe they do.
Okay.
And not only at necessarily at the state or very large jurisdictional level, but then also at some of the, I want to say lower level because I'm not a hierarchical guy, but some counties in California are bigger than our state. So I see a lot of images and a lot of project descriptions that I think are very comparable and they fit well with what we're thinking, what we need, I should say.
I noticed that the partnering firm isn't always the architect of the record on project experience, although the projects are impressive and there's experience there.
And I think that's I think that is the nature of the relationship here. So I think that demonstrates that they know how to work within the confines or the parameters of that experience or that working relationship.
True.
Other comments about their project experience and the individuals associated with them?
I thought that the diagram on page 8 was useful just to demonstrate program components of this facility, and perhaps that was part of the pre-design originally, but it helps understand the project.
Yeah, I think that particular graphic may even be off the cover of the pre-design.
Okay.
Quite as really somewhat emblematic of the concept.
Yeah.
To include the media facility function that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, it clearly gave me a little better understanding of the components of the project as well.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to skim through the pre-design and so many pages.
I always refer to that one as the Lego depiction, which is actually very helpful as people as we tried to brief, again, particularly some legislative and other stakeholders on the components of the project. The building wouldn't look like Legos, but it certainly helps people understand the main components and their interaction.
I agree that was a helpful page. And also, this firm reviewed and disadvantages and ideas and approach, which, of course, they probably thought about a little bit in the pre-design, but that's a positive in this.
Other comments about their project experience? Moving on to aesthetics, or whatever we want to call it. And clearly it's hard to know, given the relationship between these two firms, who will be actually responsible for some of that aesthetic. But I thought the photos certainly showed, clear environments, sunlit or well lit. And I realize it's a secondary priority in terms of criteria. A good good indication of how they might approach aesthetics. Turning now to the approach and understanding.
Well, I kind of jumped the gun on this one with going ahead and talking about how I appreciate the site options and opinions that they gave, but I was looking for a little more meat as in terms of what their approach would be 2020, 2021 on this, I guess, versus the 2011 approach that they took in pre-design. So I was looking for a little more detailed information in their approach.
Other comments about their approach and methodology?
I would agree with Sue's comment on the site. I liked the site types that they outlined, and as far as looking ahead to how things would change, they do use the term next generation EOC and talk about elements that will have to be addressed.
I thought their discussion on budget on page 17 missed one of the fifth key component as you try to put this budget together is the cost of the land. Knowing that that comes within your $29+ million.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, you won't know how much you have to build until you get that land deal at least moving in the right direction. So hopefully that goes soon.
Something outside their control, I think.
Exactly. Other comments about their approach and methodology? With that, they are a St. Paul firm, neither targeted nor veteran owned, and their net fees per Minnesota employee are $31,529. And I will say to this firm, I'm not using 300 employees as the factor. I'm using the 211 that comes from your earlier description of the firm and its Minnesota employees. Turning now to firm E. All right. So they are a complete team, if I read everybody's resume correctly. They're EOC design specialist out of Phoenix. They give a lengthy description on page 2 of how that working relationship has been on their Dakota County facility, and that will be the same relationship going forward, which led me to understand better what the programming and design role will be. The EOC specialist has lots of national experience, which, you know, in some ways, I think, Joey, you guys know what you want or need, but having that broad national focus will give you what are they doing in one state or another, even if it's not, doesn't end up being pertinent to you folks. And this team has worked together primarily in the past. But again, only on the Dakota County project.
We've got a member on their team that trains and lectures and does conferences to police groups on faculty programs, their facility, I guess, and faculty programs.
Other comments on the proposed team and their individual qualifications? So looking at project experience, you know, I realize, Glenn, you're the project manager, but in this project, I really value more current and more relevant experience, in addition to breadth of experience. And when I look at page 8 and I see 6 or 7 projects that are within the last couple of years, I mean, that suggests to me that they're more heavily involved, understand better some of the latest trends and technologies with an EOC.
Yeah, the specialist firm says they've done 72 emergency operation centers or fusion centers. Some of those are in police stations and such, but they're still emergency operation centers.
Right.
And the local project manager claims to have done 4 to 5 EOCs. So I guess you have it from both.
Yeah. What's a fusion center?
Fusion center is a usually associated with intelligence gathering, information gathering, distillation, and then sharing. The legend is they come out of the 9/11 Commission as with the punchline being that all the information that was needed was out there, but it was spread out over a bunch of different agencies and jurisdictions, and they identified a need to have a place in every state, at least one, some states have more, where that information can all be figuratively dumped, infused, and then a common product put out. So from a homeland security and a law enforcement operations, fusion centers that are very important, that's what they do. Yeah, ours, quite frankly, not even quite frankly, ours is located currently in the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, BCA.
Okay.
So is that opposed to a confusion center?
Very well said.
Do we have one of those?
We'll answer that one, Joe.
You know, as I look at page 8, I see a whole lot of law enforcement and a lot of responder, incident command response type organizations, very tactical and operational. And that is not necessary. Well, it isn't what we do in the State Emergency Operations Center. We provide incident support. We provide resources to those types of organizations and a lot of those facilities like fire station headquarters, 911, dispatch, those types of things. So I saw my gut when I looked at that was there's a lot of tactical first responder facilities that they've done as opposed to more of the higher level strategic management and support. But
So,
again, they're relevant. They're just not a perfect fit.
so the projects then from 10 to page 10 through 13, are any of those more closely relevant to the work at hand?
I think going quickly, the one on page 10 is.
Okay.
11 is really not. That's a training facility for police officers. 12 has probably some components that would in the monitoring center. 13, yes, at a county level. And I would say categorically 14, that's where it gets very responder
True.
and law enforcement heavy. So some, yes, but again, a lot of the critical mass, when I look at it, they have experience, but when they put their numbers out there, it looks to me like the bulk of their numbers are in those police headquarters, fire stations, etc.
Yeah,
Dispatch.
there were quite the numbers. I was impressed with right off before they went into the project list that there's 300 of 72, another 31 of another. But I found myself looking for where they're involved in something that was more of a hardened facility, maybe had the ATFP noted or the SCIF experience noted, or even UFC. No government work necessarily, so I didn't see a lot of that.
You know, and I will say to this team and possibly to several of the others, we get this a lot, where we get a lot of narrative, but if you just give us the 5 things that make this project relevant to the project at hand, it really does help us. Okay. Comments on aesthetics. You know, and I'm going to say, because most of these project experiences are for the EOC consultant, and they were not the design firm, it's hard to sort of throw those images into the discussion about the aesthetics. So we really have no projects short of a few on page 14 that the prime firm has done that lend itself to that, to maybe that, any comment. Turning now to approach and methodology.
Perhaps for you, the term survivability, is that an external threat or durable building materials, or what exactly is that? In the bottom of page 15, site.
I'd say they'd all be considerations to go over in the pre-design. You know, certainly if you had a weather event, you'd want to make sure your site is still operational. But overall, I thought the approach methodology was a little thin compared to others.
What, a couple of comments, and they mentioned it on 15, and then they mentioned it again on 17, is the ability of the EOC consultant to do benchmarking with other facilities. And while they suggest touring others, that they could bring some of that knowledge of what other facilities are doing that are working and not working. Hopefully that they can, you know, if the evidence of their experience is there, then they should be able to bring actually lots of, here's what they're doing in other facilities.
And that would be helpful because part of the pre-design is to do precedent studies.
Yeah.
And that would be a strength.
Couple of notes on approach and understanding. They did address the pandemic impact of design and space and systems. But in their narrative, they kept indicating there's a CM instead of a CM at risk. And maybe it was just something where they didn't catch it when they were putting it towards this project approach. But I was looking for their experience with CM at risk and just saw CM.
I would note their comments on what is it, page 18 under special considerations as understanding how things can change, particularly for a facility that you're looking to use for many years. I'm not sure if they've really explained how they're going to handle all this, but it's something for us to keep in mind for all of these projects, that they need to design for the, what's called here, the new unknowns.
Yeah, I might have thought that they'd at least identify some of the things that have changed, you know, that become the part of the component, or at least the thinking as you go to the what do they call it, the next generation of EOCs. Other comments about their approach and methodology? Hearing none, I'm going to say this one E is Minneapolis firm, neither targeted nor veteran owned, and their net fees per Minnesota employee are $76,610. Moving on to firm F. So, again, I think this is a complete team. I think they checked all the boxes in terms of firms identified, or roles identified. What I got confused about was how the team lead, the designer, and the subject matter experts will work together. It wasn't clear to me in either their descriptions, their organizational chart, or in the narrative. Those four individuals, well, they've got little bubbles on page 10 about their levels of involvement. I just wasn't sure who was really leading the programming and design efforts.
They bill themselves in their letter as a local team with national experience, but their EOC consultant is from elsewhere.
I think that was true. A couple others as well. They seem to have a lot of, what I'm going to call, for lack of a better word, technology consultants. They've gone out of house for their lead mechanical electrical, who's going to do low voltage security and technology. And then they've got a technology consultant who's doing AV and telecom. And then their EOC personnel is got a technology consultant. So I'm not sure that I understand, again, how they're all working together, whether it's the subject matter experts, the designer, the lead, team lead, and then the technology piece as well. And on any of these, I think should this firm or other firms be shortlisted where you've had that question, I think it'll be important that they address that very subject. How are you going to work together, and who's leading what efforts?
I think that's a good point. I was impressed with the team makeup and the focus on bringing the strengths forward for each of the members, and maybe it wasn't their specific role, but they had experience in that area. I appreciated what I saw for government projects and project experience, and again, like I saw all these items referenced that were in the RFP that they answered that they've experienced specifically in those areas on projects and current projects.
Other comments about the team?
I thought it was interesting that this team did have experts enough that were presenters in conferences to Homeland Security and secure facility conferences.
If we turn to the project experience, and this is, again, where I'm going to turn to Joe and Glenn to help us understand whether the projects that are shown here are really applicable to your project.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the page numbers. I do believe on page 12.
Yeah.
The first project on the left is I don't want to say an exact fit, but that is the type of facility that we are trying to build. They have more partners. There are other agencies beyond us, but their Homeland Security, that state's Homeland Security Emergency Management Agency, and their Emergency Operations Center, that is what we're building. They have some additional partners in there with fire marshal and state police, etc. But to build the facility for their state emergency management agency, including the EOC, is what we're doing.
Okay.
Some of the others they're operational and they're secure facilities, particularly the military ones. There's a training facility on page 14. Again, that's not necessarily applicable. I can't quite tell, although it's a police substation. I can't quite tell on 15, but certainly a state emergency management agencies, offices, and emergency operations center that's what we're building.
Okay. Well, good. Any other comments about their project experience and or relevance? Moving on to approach and methodology.
I felt their approach was engaged. They acknowledged the CM and risk. And I found this kind of interesting. They noted that they understand a Minnesota pre-design process or format. And I don't exactly know what that means, but they covered that.
Well, what I will tell you, and I think all of the firms probably have as well, it's a very prescribed process and very prescribed set of chapters or sections, if you will, just need to get covered. Some of which are written by the design consultant, and some of which are written actually by either Glenn or Joe's staff. So knowing what those key ingredients are is important.
That's a way for them to acknowledge the schedule.
Yep.
I liked the item on page 17, I think it is, the discussion of functionality, particularly day in the life process. Very, very practical about how the building will be used and elements interact and personnel use the facility. So I thought that was helpful. I'd like to see that in all of the proposals.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I like the picture in the lower right quadrant of that page, again, with the different functional areas and the adjacencies, acknowledging the redundancy for systems, the human part of wellness areas, separate entrances for public media, staff. All those things are certainly features that we would discuss. So I appreciate their understanding of the space and how it's used and how it works together.
And going back to team, the manager has this experience in these secure federal facilities. He's their national lead. So he'd have the knowledge, I guess, during the process.
Other comments about their approach and methodology? All right, hearing none. This is a Minneapolis firm, neither targeted nor veteran owned, and their net fees for Minnesota employee are $48,415. Turning now to the last firm, Firm G. So interesting association between the prime and their core and shell subconsultant. I think they've checked all the boxes in terms of what you're requiring as the consultant team. Their project designer and subject matter expert certainly has broad experience all over the country. Not sure how applicable it is, but want to hear more about the role of programming and designer from this team. Other comments about the team and how they're organized?
There's definite critical mission experience, FEMA, DoD clients.
Shall we turn to their project examples? Clearly from the prime, most of their examples are coming for their subject matter expert. And who will be the designer on the, I think is the designer on this project. And I again turn to Joe and Glenn to tell us if these three projects on page 10 exemplify what you're after in terms of this project.
I'm trying to wrap my brain around. I mean, these are some mammoth projects with much more than the operations center. I don't know if these are, in one case, it looks like a corporate headquarters that has some sort of global operations center, which certainly is applicable. Bottom one seems to be
Transit?
yeah, very, very transit related. But again, some of the operations monitoring parts are. So it's again, and I apologize, it's sort of a yeah, kinda. And there's pieces and there's parts, particularly within the mission critical centers that they talk about. But I'm not seeing a direct fit like some of the previous firms might have had. But the closest are on page 10. It gets looser for me and my feeble understanding of things as we go through the next two pages of project examples.
Well, I think that page 11 gives an example of how this subconsultant, other partner firm, has worked within another prime firm. So evidence of that prior kind of working relationship. Although none of these were with the prime firm listed in as part of this proposal. And then yet certainly the projects on 12, I'm not quite sure that I understand their relevance.
Yeah, their examples, particularly on 12, left me thinking they wanted to design a highly secure data center where we're really looking for a place for people to meet and operate efficiently.
Yeah. So turning to approach and methodology. I was left thinking, it left me with the impression that this project will be well managed, but they didn't provide much insight into, the design of these kind of facilities and the issues to be encountered and what is the next generation of EOCs. And the only thing I thought that was particularly interesting was their notion of early bid packages. But again, it gave me an impression you'd be well managed, but wasn't sure what they were bringing to the table in terms of design and issues that you're going to be needing to address. Any other comments about the approach and methodology for Firm G?
There was a note to their sustainability, that they have their own climate change challenge that they use on all buildings. And back to their partnering team, I got the impression that they found strength in that team when it came to the planning stages for moderating and negotiating with groups of people for consensus on the project. There seems to be a lot of strengths there.
I'm sorry, Sue, could you explain who you're talking about?
The partnering architectural firm has a particular team member that's got strengths in planning.
Okay.
In the planning and development phases. It seemed like that would be a prime role for this person.
Are you talking about the person on the top of page 5?
Again, I'm looking at my notes without page.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Because that planning firm is charged with the core and the shell.
Yes.
Okay.
I found myself looking closely at that partnering team to see what they were bringing to the table, and that was one thing that stood out for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think they made a strong case for why they're bringing that particular team to the table.
No. Okay. Any other comments about this CG? Okay. With that, they're a Minneapolis firm, neither targeted nor veteran owned, and their net fees per Minnesota employee are $3,640. Okay. Now our task is to figure out how many firms we should bring back to interview. We normally do 3 or 4. Occasionally we've done more, but I guess I'm not seeing in this case that I would recommend that we do more than 3 or 4. Comments from any?
I'd be hard pressed to go beyond 3.
I found a 2 strong and another to be added, and a 4th would be a little dubious.
Same for me. I think 3 is what I'm looking.
Magic number.
I agree. 3.
I would propose 3 as well.
I guess I concur as well. The other then is to figure out how long we should have both for the presentation and then how long should we have for question and answer. You know, again, typically we do 20 minutes for interview and 20 minutes for question and answer. Last week we increased the amount of time for the presentation simply because we were mindful of this was a new technology for many firms. However, I'm not sure that we've discovered that there was great impact with technology for these firms. And I'm looking at Aaron as I say this. We did offer to the firm last time a test run in technology, and which I'd like to do again this time as well. So I'm thinking 20 minutes for interviews and 20 minutes for questions, but I defer to other comments from anybody.
I agree, Catherine.
I agree.
2020.
2020?
2020.
Okay.
We
So,
give them
can I
21
have-
on Q&A.
What's wrong with
What were you
2021?
You know, and I guess I'm looking at specific. I mean, we can probably figure this out ourselves, but Joe and Glenn, you know, clearly this is an important partner for you folks. So I just want to be sure that you're comfortable with 20 minutes for them to present, and then we'll get 20 minutes to ask them questions.
Joe, we've been through this before. I probably can't remember back, but
I sure can't.
I don't know. Do you think it takes any longer? It's kind of a team of, in many cases, the local firm and then the EOC specialist. Do they deserve a little extra time just to, I don't know, go 25-20 or something like that?
Well, like I've said, like you said, Glenn, I've got very little experience, and it was a long time ago, and I can't remember it. But I also think that they understand that same thing about the importance of the partnership and the understanding of what we're doing. And if that can't be sold in 20 minutes, I would be dubious.
I'm sold. I'm sold on 2020.
Okay, and with that, can I have a motion for interviewing 3 firms and the time limit being 20 minutes for interviews and 20 minutes for question and answer?
So move, Tucker.
Second, Buyer.
All right. So here's what happens now. We're going to, in a minute, stop recording. And Glenn, Joe, and Kevin, you need to talk among yourselves. Please mute your microphones, and you can even turn off your video if you like. Is it fair for us to ask you to come back in 20 minutes with your vote? Does that give you enough time?
I think so.
Yeah, I defer to Glenn, but I think so.
So like at 10:50.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Joe and Kevin, can you guys set up a Microsoft Teams and we can talk offline?
Yeah, just you, me, and Kevin. Do you want to just do, because Kevin's sitting next to me, do you just want me to call you? That's simple.
Fine too.
So don't leave this meeting. Just turn off your video and turn off your audio.
Right. That's my big fear, Catherine. If I start pushing Teams buttons.
We'll know if you're on, and we'll let you know.
So Glenn, I'll give you a call.
Okay. All right, and we'll see everybody else back at 10:50.
Okay.